The planet Varelia Prime was a world of steel cities and burning skies, where dragons flew under the command of alien nobles. These creatures were more than beasts, they were living war machines, bred to obey only their masters. Humans had once been free explorers of the stars, but now they were nothing more than laborers. They worked in the shadows, cleaning, fixing, and serving the alien lords who had conquered their worlds long ago. Among those forgotten humans was Caleb Ward, a quiet young stable boy. He worked in the royal dragon hangars, where hundreds of dragons rested in vast iron cages. His life was simple and harsh: scrub the floors, feed the beasts, stay silent, and avoid the eyes of the overseers. The other workers called him Ghost Boy, because he barely spoke. He didn't fight or argue. He just worked, his heart heavy but calm. To everyone else, Caleb was nothing. One human out of thousands, small and replaceable. But Caleb had something different inside him. A kindness that refused to die, even in a world that had forgotten what kindness meant. He loved the dragons even though they scared him. He would whisper to them when no one was listening, small words of comfort as if they were lonely too. One night, when the other workers had gone, Caleb stayed behind to finish cleaning. The hangar was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping on the metal roof. As he walked down the rows of cages, he heard a faint, broken sound, a cry. He followed it and found a small dragon hatchling lying in a corner, its wing torn and its chest rising weakly. It had been left to die. Caleb knelt beside it, his heart breaking at the sight. "Hey there, it's okay," he whispered, not expecting it to understand. The little dragon's eyes glowed faintly, flickering like dying embers. Caleb reached out, slowly, carefully, until his hand rested on its rough scales. For a moment nothing happened. Then the dragon's breathing slowed. The glow in its eyes softened, steadying into calm light. It gave a soft rumble, not anger, not pain, but peace. Caleb froze, barely breathing, afraid to move. The dragon tilted its head and pressed its snout against his hand before closing its eyes. He sat there for a long time, his hand on the creature's warm skin, feeling its heartbeat slow. Something strange and deep stirred in him, not power but connection. When the guards came for the morning inspection, they saw the dragon lying peacefully beside the human boy. Their weapons rose instantly. "Step away," one shouted. But before they could act, the dragon lifted its head and gave a warning growl, not at Caleb but at them. No one spoke. No one could explain what they were seeing. A human, a low-born stable boy, had touched a dragon and lived. And from that night on, something in the air around Caleb changed. The dragons watched him differently. Something old, something powerful had just awakened. By the next morning, the story had spread like wildfire through the halls of the noble fortress. Servants whispered it in corners, guards repeated it in disbelief. A human boy had touched a dragon and lived. Most nobles laughed at the rumor. They said it was luck or perhaps a trick of fear that made the creature behave. Humans, in their eyes, were incapable of anything special. But then something began to happen that no one could deny. Whenever Caleb Ward entered the hangar, the dragons reacted strangely. They didn't growl, they didn't lash out. Instead, they lowered their heads slightly, their eyes following him with calm attention. Even the massive war dragons, creatures that had ripped soldiers apart, stayed completely still as he walked past. The other workers noticed first, stepping back in awe. They bow to him," one whispered. The nobles didn't believe it until they saw it themselves. When Lord Kale, the commander of the Eyrie, arrived to inspect the dragons, Caleb happened to be cleaning near one of the larger beasts. The moment the boy approached, the dragon knelt, its heavy body pressing into the ground. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Lord Kale's expression turned cold. "This is impossible," he said. "No human commands dragons. It's an illusion. A fluke." To prove his point, he ordered a test, one that no human could survive. Caleb would enter the training pit with Firemaw, a dragon known for burning handlers alive. Its scales were black as coal, its eyes glowing red with fury. Dozens of soldiers gathered to watch. Some came out of curiosity, others to see the foolish boy meet his end. When they led Caleb into the pit, he could hear the dragons breathing, deep, rumbling like thunder trapped in a cage. The gates opened and Firemaw emerged, smoke curling from its nostrils. The heat from its body made the air shimmer. Caleb's legs trembled, but he didn't run. Instead, he took a slow step forward. "Easy now," he whispered, his voice quiet but steady. "You're not my enemy." The dragon roared, shaking the ground, but Caleb didn't back away. He kept speaking softly, each word filled with calm. The massive beast hesitated. Its wings twitched. Then, before everyone's eyes, Firemaw lowered its head to the ground. The sound that followed wasn't a growl, it was a low, deep purr. The arena fell silent. Even the nobles watching from above were speechless. No one had ever seen a dragon bow, not to a human. Lord Kale's face went pale with disbelief. He ordered immediate scans demanding to know what made this boy different. Scientists tested Caleb for implants, for hidden devices, for psychic traces, but they found nothing. His blood was ordinary. His body was unaltered. When they released him, everyone looked at him differently. Even the dragons outside the pit seemed to turn their heads as he passed, their eyes glowing softly in silent recognition. No one could explain it. No one could deny it. The dragons of Varelia, for the first time in living memory, had chosen to obey a human, and that human was a simple stable boy named Caleb Ward. The palace was no longer quiet. Fear had settled over the noble houses of Varelia Prime like a storm cloud that refused to move. What had begun as rumor was now undeniable. The dragons were obeying a human boy. No alien lord could explain it, and no one dared to challenge it. Each day the creatures grew more restless under alien command, yet calm and gentle when Caleb Ward was near. In panic, the nobles demanded answers. Ancient archives were opened, records locked away since the early days of their empire. What they found changed everything. The truth had been buried for thousands of years, hidden from both aliens and the humans they enslaved. The dragons had not been created by the alien lords at all. They were the work of the first humans, built through science and compassion, not cruelty. These creatures were not meant to be weapons but protectors. They had been designed to sense human emotion, to bond with empathy, to defend those who felt rather than those who ruled. Over time, wars and corruption erased that history. The aliens who conquered the surviving humans took control of the dragons, using machines to force obedience. But that control was never perfect. It was artificial. The real bond had been lost, until now. Caleb's blood carried something ancient, a genetic echo from the humans who first walked among dragons. It wasn't a power that could be measured or copied. It was something deeper, a connection of heart, a bond built on trust and emotion. The dragons didn't see him as a master, they saw him as one of their own. When the nobles learned this, fear turned to rage. If humans learn this truth, Lord Kale hissed, they will rise. The empire will fall. To them, Caleb was no longer a curiosity, he was a threat to everything they had built. That night, under the cover of darkness, soldiers were sent to the royal stables. Their orders were simple: eliminate the human before word could spread. Caleb had no idea. He was asleep in a small corner of the stables, resting beside the hatchling he'd once saved. As the soldiers approached, the air began to tremble. A deep, echoing rumble rolled through the ground, low at first, then louder, until the walls themselves shook. The guards froze, looking up. From every corner of the city, dragons began to rise into the night sky, hundreds, then thousands. Their wings beat with the force of thunder, their scales glowing in colors of gold, crimson, and silver. The soldiers dropped their weapons as the sky filled with fire and light. The dragons roared as one, the sound shaking the stars above. It wasn't a cry of attack, but of warning. The message was clear: he is under our protection. Caleb woke to the sound of wings, stepping outside in disbelief as the heavens burned with dragon fire. He didn't understand why they were doing it, but deep down he felt it: the bond that had been lost to time had returned. The boy who once cleaned their stalls now stood at the center of a legacy older than empires. And the dragons, once enslaved, had chosen their side. The night after the dragons rose to defend him, Caleb Ward knew he could no longer stay in the city. The nobles would not stop. They feared him too deeply now, and their armies would soon march to destroy anything, or anyone, that stood beside him. So, under the light of 2 moons, Caleb fled the capital with a small group of humans who had heard what happened. They were farmers, servants, miners, people who had lived their whole lives under alien rule. For the first time in generations, they followed someone not because he was powerful, but because he gave them hope. They crossed the vast plains of Varelia Prime, endless fields of silver grass that shimmered beneath the stars. Above them, dragons circled in silence, their wings casting shadows that stretched for miles. They didn't need to be commanded, they simply followed, protecting Caleb and his people from above. When they stopped to rest, dragons would land nearby like sentinels, their glowing eyes keeping watch through the night. The humans had once feared these creatures, but now they looked at them with wonder. For the first time in centuries, they dared to dream that maybe the world could change. But word of Caleb's escape spread quickly. The alien coalition, desperate to regain control, launched a massive assault. Dozens of warships filled the skies, engines roaring like thunder. Their message was clear: destroy the boy, destroy the rebellion, and crush the humans once and for all. When the first bombs fell, the earth split open with fire. But before the flames could reach the humans, a deafening roar erupted across the sky. The dragons struck back. They moved like a living storm, thousands of wings beating as one, flames burning brighter than any weapon. Fire met steel. Lightning tore through ships. The alien fleets broke apart under the fury of the dragons' assault. The ground trembled with every strike, and the sky itself seemed alive with color and light. Caleb stood at the edge of the battlefield, his heart pounding as he watched the chaos unfold. He hadn't asked for this war. He hadn't wanted to be anyone's leader. He was just a stable boy who cared too much. And now the dragons, creatures once thought to be enslaved, were fighting for him, for his people, for freedom. When the last of the enemy ships began to fall from the sky, Caleb raised his hand. His voice was soft, almost lost in the roar of the wind. Enough, he said. No more death. We fight to free, not to rule. The dragons heard him. Instantly they stopped mid-flight, hovering in silence. The sky that had been full of fire became still. The surviving alien soldiers looked up in awe, not at monsters but at mercy. Caleb walked forward slowly, the dragons parting around him like waves. He could feel their hearts beating through the air, fierce, loyal, but calm. That day, victory was not claimed through destruction but through compassion. The boy who once cleaned stalls had led dragons into battle and ended a war with nothing more than kindness. And as the world looked to him, they didn't see a conqueror. They saw what humanity was meant to be: strong, gentle, and unbreakable. Months passed after the final battle. The fires of war had gone cold, and the sky above Varelia Prime was clear once again. Fields that had been turned to ash now shimmered with new life, and the air carried the sound of laughter, something the world hadn't heard in generations. Humans who had once bowed their heads in silence, now walked freely through the streets. They were rebuilding their homes, their lives, and their hope. At the center of it all was Caleb Ward, the boy who had never sought power, fame, or glory. He still lived near the old stables, the same place where his story had begun. He spent his mornings helping the dragons who had survived the war, cleaning their wounds, whispering to them softly, and feeding the hatchlings that hatched under his care. To him, they weren't beasts of war or weapons of legend. They were friends as they had always been. One bright morning, a convoy of alien ships landed on the plains outside the capital. The leaders of the noble houses, once proud, cruel, and untouchable, stepped out under a white flag. Their faces were pale with shame and fear. Their dragons refused to move, bowing their heads low before Caleb as he approached. It was clear that no command or order from their masters could make them fight again. The nobles offered Caleb a crown made of silver and dragon glass. "You have united what we could not," their spokesman said quietly. "You ended the war. You should rule Varelia." Caleb looked down at the shining crown, then back at the people who had gathered around him, humans, dragons, even some of the aliens who had chosen peace. He shook his head slowly, a gentle smile touching his lips. "I don't want a throne," he said softly. "I was just a stable boy. That's all I ever needed to be." His words spread through the crowd like a warm wind. People began to smile, some even crying. They realized that true strength didn't come from crowns or titles, but from kindness, from the courage to care when no one else would. Caleb's refusal of power only made him greater in their eyes. As night fell, the dragons took to the skies. Thousands of them rose together, their wings glowing with every color of the stars. They circled the capital in a slow, graceful dance, their roars echoing like a song of freedom. The light from their wings painted the sky in gold and blue, and for a moment, it felt like the heavens themselves were bowing to the boy who had once cleaned their stalls. Down below, the people of Varelia stood in silence, watching the sky. No one doubted anymore. The dragons had chosen their true master, not through power or command but through heart. The name Caleb Ward, once whispered in mockery, became a legend told across the stars. The story of the boy who reminded the galaxy that even the smallest human heart can make the heavens kneel.